Hi, everybody. Steve Wilder of Sorensen, Wilder and Associates back here with you for another one of our safety and security podcasts. This time it's a little bit of a spooky one because my guest today is a guy that people have asked me if he's a ghost. They asked me if he really exists. They asked me if it's a made-up name. And the answers to those is yes, no, no. He is real. He is very real in my life. And his name is Chris Sorensen. And Chris is my business partner. Chris is the one, as I said, he's not out in the field as the rest of us are, but he's been a friend for 40 plus years. He's been a colleague for 40 plus years. And he's been my business partner for 20 plus years. So, very, very important person in my life. And people don't understand that the reason they don't see Chris, or the reason that he's not so visible with SWA, is because the way our organization, the way our company is built, we have a couple of different operating units under one corporate umbrella. And I run the consulting and training side, which is Sorensen, Wilder and Associates. And Chris runs our sister company, which is called Midwest Integrated Solutions, and they are a security systems integrator. So Chris, welcome. Even though I just saw you here in the office 5 minutes ago, it's good to have you on board with us. I know a lot of our listeners have been looking forward to hearing us talk and to realizing that, yeah, you really do exist.
Thank you for the great introduction. A little more than I expected. I didn't realize that people thought I was a ghost or was non-existent, because I sure feel like I'm not. I'm here anywhere from 40 to 50 hours a week typically. So I don't feel like a ghost.
And you don't look like one either, even though you're withering away to normal every day. Chris, I talked a little bit about the relationship between SWA and MIS. Talk a little bit about MIS, kind of give our listeners a little bit of an overview. I know we use the term security systems integrator. I think most security professionals understand that, but we may have others listening who really don't understand what an integrator is. So why don't you give a little overview of MIS?
Okay, well, MIS, as you mentioned, is called Midwest Integrated Solutions. We are a security integrator. We're located here in Bradley, Illinois, and we serve customers pretty much throughout the Midwest. We're not quite nationwide, although we would probably go nationwide if we had a customer who was really interested in something, a business outside the state of Illinois or outside the Midwest. But we specialize in access control, CCTV, infant protection, and a variety of other systems. I mean, anything to do with security, we pretty much do. The integrator part is what sets us apart. One of the things that sets us apart from others is if you've got an existing system, we will send somebody out to take a look at what you have and help you decide what is there that we can continue to use, what we need to replace, and how to get your system working, like your access control working with your CCTV working with your infant protection if you have infant protection, or security working with your alarm system, your CCTV and alarms together. And the value of an integrator is that we can come out and do an assessment, see what you have, what you need, and in the long run, we're saving you money. Because if you've got card readers already, most card readers will work with the systems that we install. A lot of cameras, if they're IP cameras, it might be just a matter of changing the camera out and keeping the cabling. So there's a lot of different ways that an integrator will work with you to save you money. We have an unwavering commitment to our customers. As you know, I was a customer, you were a customer at one time, and I think that gives us a little bit of an edge on knowing what the customer is looking for. And service is probably the biggest thing that sets us apart from anybody else. Our service is second to none.
And for our listeners, Chris, that most of them know me and know our background or know my background, just a little bit on your background so they understand where you're coming from. You and I started our careers together at the same hospital back in the very early 80s. We were together at that hospital for almost 10 years. And I stayed with that hospital and with that system and grew with them. And after 8 or 9 years, together there, you went out and went on to bigger and better. took a role as director of safety and security at a hospital in the south suburbs of Chicago, and then moved to one of the tertiary hospitals in Chicago, where you were the chief safety officer, and ultimately ended up at the University of Chicago hospitals, where you oversaw the police department and the security department. So you've been in healthcare security most of your adult life. But from then, and you're right, I was a customer, because you went on and got out of hospital security on a day-to-day operations basis and went to work in sales with an integrator in the Chicago area. And I was one of your customers. And so, I got to experience firsthand what you're talking about with building the integrated systems. And back then it was a challenge, because back then a lot of number one, there was a lot less to choose from in terms of companies that were manufacturing access control, CCTV, infant systems, wander elopement systems for hospitals and long-term care facilities. And a lot of the ones that were out there then had a closed architecture, where you either bought their product or anything else you bought wouldn't tie in together with it. Is that still true, or do we see more open architecture now?
Experienced customers are asking for and requiring open architecture. If for some reason a customer of ours wasn't happy with us, every system we sell has open architecture. So if they're not happy with us, they can go out and they can buy, product XYZ and install it. And really, they're going to save money, because they can use all the parts that we installed.
I get that. And you talk, we obviously strong healthcare backgrounds for both of us, but both of us, SWA and MIS, work outside of hospitals as well. I know both of us work in a lot of educational facilities. We work in manufacturing facilities, SWA doing the safety and security work, MIS doing the integrated security systems. So I don't want our listeners just to think that MIS is a healthcare only. You guys are working with a lot of schools in the Chicago area right now. I know you've worked with some outside of Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana. So that's an important point to make too, that there's a lot of different disciplines out there that you guys are working with. One of the things that whenever we do on the SWA side of the house, whenever we do a security vulnerability assessment, whether it's a healthcare facility, a school, a manufacturing, retailing, whatever, we use a system that you and I developed years ago, still use it, called the P2T2 system. And that is the 4 critical elements of a security management program: people, programs, training, and technology. And in using those, we see a lot of facilities that use the technology almost to a point of overuse. They neglect the people portion. They neglect the programs, the policies, good policies and procedures. They neglect good security related training, and they put all of their eggs in one basket, if you will, and use security technology, which is great, but there's such a thing as overusing it too. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, technology is fantastic. I love it. Obviously, we sell and install technology, but technology is just one piece of the pie. Like you said, you've also got to have the right people, the right programs, the right training. And one of the things that I think is really critically important for a systems integrator is that training. Often we see systems installed, and the person who installed it, whether an integrator or somebody else, doesn't really matter. They walk away and it's your system now. One of the things that Midwest Integrated Solutions does is we will train you initially, but we also realize that initially, it's a new system to you. You're learning. You don't understand the system. So what we offer is, after a month of use of the system, we'll come back and retrain you, because now you're going to have questions that you wouldn't have had initially, because you don't know anything about the system. Now you've had 30 days to use the system and develop your questions, hopefully even write your questions down, so that when we come back in 30 days, and this is at no charge, we come back and we'll retrain you again. We also offer the same thing in 3 months or 6 months. Obviously we charge for those, but we want to make sure that the customer is trained on the system they use. One of the things that we see too much of, not only the overuse of security, but sometimes it's the underuse. They buy an expensive system, and then because they haven't been trained properly, they're using only a fraction of what it can do. We like to make sure our customers are well trained and use the system for what it's intended for. And I'll be honest with you, one of the reasons we do that if you're really well trained on your system, you're going to come back to us because you're going to understand the system, you're going to use it, and you're going to want somebody there that is on your side.
We were visiting a hospital, I think it was in Michigan a few months ago, and doing an SWA there, security vulnerability assessment for them. And they had spent some really good money, some really big money on a really nice engineered access control system. Unfortunately, everybody who got an access control card was given a card that worked 24/7 on just about every door, with the exception of the pharmacy. And that was one of the things we questioned. Why aren't you using the technology to its capability? You're just touching the tip of the iceberg the way you're doing it. You can shut that thing down so it will only work on certain doors at certain times of the day, certain days of the week, certain weeks of the month, however you want to set it up. And people just don't use it that way. I'm like you. I want to see it used right. It's such a valuable resource when we look at the protection approach. But one of the things that we still identify, and we see this more in small business than we do in bigger ones, and that is they spend a lot of good money on a good CCTV system, and nobody is monitoring the cameras. They're using it totally reactively. If something happens, we can go back and look at the recording. Well, that doesn't keep anything from happening. And our goal in security is to minimize the risk, not to be able to go back and catch the bad guy. How do we deal with that? I mean, obviously, we'd like to have a big emergency operations center where we can monitor all the cameras, but a lot of companies can't get around that. How can they get around that challenge without having to invest tens of thousands of dollars in equipment and in manpower to have somebody watching cameras 24/7?
As you know, security technology is rapidly changing. One of the biggest areas of change we see is in CCTV, or closed circuit TV cameras. Obviously, these systems are still used to observe and record events, like you just mentioned. But with the onset of artificial intelligence, we can now alert staff or police. So a camera isn't just viewing what's happening. It can actually alert your security staff. It can alert your management. It can alert the police or fire, or whoever you need to alert, automatically when somebody gets into an area they don't belong in. And each camera is programmable. So you don't have to program every camera to do that, but maybe you've got a highly vulnerable area that nobody belongs in. So we alert the police or security whenever somebody gets there. We can also set up an automatic voice message. We've seen this in areas where, like cell towers, and I know you're very familiar with cell tower industry. They have people come out and dump garbage at their cell towers, or try to break in and steal copper off the cell tower. Well, now, as the camera sees somebody pulling up, it can start to record very close, like 30 frames a second, and alert the police. And it can also, you can talk to the person, or the camera can be set up to automatically give a message that, hey, the police have been alerted and we have your license plate number. It's going to probably make them leave rather than finish whatever they were doing. So cameras have just come so far. In addition to reviewing the video, you can set the time and date of the event if you didn't see it happen. You can set the direction of travel, the color of clothes or the vehicle of the offender. On an even higher level, cameras are now used for facial recognition and license plate recognition. And Smart Search has made it so simple. When I was at the University of Chicago, might be aging myself here a little bit, but when I was there, we were still recording on VCRs. I had a full-time person that did nothing but review videotape. Now that same videotape that took them hours to review can be done in a few clicks on a computer and be more accurate. And the pictures are 100 times better.
One of the hot buttons with all of our clients across every industry that we work with is still active shooter. We're still getting a lot of requests for active shooter training, starting with preparedness, then response and mitigation, and then recovery. Technology plays a part of that. But I wonder if most of our listeners are aware of some of the active shooter technology that's out there in the market now that can be integrated into their existing security management program to prepare them even more to either minimize the chances of it happening, or to at least make staff aware when it is happening. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's another area that's come a long way. And we still have metal detectors. Metal detectors at schools we're seeing more and more of. But a metal detector only detects metal as you're coming into the school. And we see that, we've had kids fill their pockets full of metal, so it takes them forever to get through a metal detector. Going back to CCTV, there are CCTV systems out there that will observe a person carrying a weapon and can actually lock down the doors before the person was able to get into a school or a hospital or some other business. And again, we can send an alert to the police, we can send an alert to security or management and stop the offender, or at least have the police notified of the offender before they ever get inside the building. It's a remarkable way of stopping an active shooter.
What about gunshot detectors? We're not really seeing many of those in any of the facilities that we're working in, again, across all industry lines. I know some communities that actually have them in neighborhoods now, where they're actually mounted on utility poles. And when there's the sound of gunshots, they notify the police to respond automatically. Are you guys seeing much from a technology point of view, developing or utilization of that type of technology, Chris?
That technology is getting better and better every day. We've got indoor gunshot detection, outdoor gunshot detection, and that technology is good, and it does alert police to a particular area. But when it's integrated with a camera system, you can not only alert the police can see what's going on before they ever get there. You can see the direction of travel. You can see who's got guns, who's shooting, who's hiding. All of that can be viewed before the police ever get there. So, I mean, the gunshot detection is amazing stuff. Indoors, we can actually start locking down doors or, alerting police, alerting security. Again, a lot of it's through CCTV. There's also gunshot detection programs out there that you don't need CCTV with. It will automatically let people know that there's a shooter in the building, and you can start following active shooter protocols that you guys train on.
Right. And I have seen one of our clients on the SWA side of the house that had the gunshot detection systems inside, and they actually had it tied in to the engineered access control system. So it would go into an internal lockdown and start securing internal doors, not securing external doors, so that we were locking the police out, of course, which we don't want to do. But it was securing some of the inside doors. The other thing I thought was really creative is also tied in with that system. On the outside of the building, they had mounted blue strobe lights near all of the entrance doors. And all of the employees, it was part of their training program. If there was an active shooter, if one of those detectors activated, not only would it start doing an automatic internal lockdown, it would also activate those outside strobe lights. And all of the employees were trained that if you're coming to work and that strobe light's going off, don't come in the building. There's only one reason that strobe light's on, and that's an armed intruder. And I was really impressed by that technology.
Yeah, we're actually doing something similar to that for a school district right now here in Illinois. It's not the gunshot detection. They don't have that currently. I know a lot of more schools are looking at that, but we're seeing more and more schools. And in fact, it's becoming a law in a lot of states that you have to have a blue light system. Think of your fire alarm system. If you've got a fire, you go pull a fire pull station, correct?
Correct.
We've got blue light systems now that you can go pull a blue police station light. So if you don't have gunshot detection, but there's something going on in your school, and not necessarily an active shooter, it might be a fight in progress, it could be any number of things, but you pull that police pull station, it does the same thing. It sets off the strobe lights outside. It alerts management inside, it alerts security, it alerts the school resource officer, and it can alert police if you choose to. You don't have to. That's your choice.
Well, it sounds like it almost combines the security technology with mass notification.
Exactly. And we also do a medical alert the same way. So we've got a blue station for a security incident. We've got a green station for a medical alert.
Okay. That's interesting. So you said earlier you love technology. I love technology, but I'll be the first to admit I'm not good at it. My recorder at home in my living room is still flashing 12 o'clock. But what wows you? I mean, there's so much, you mentioned earlier, so much new stuff coming out on the market. What are you seeing that really just makes you go, wow?
Well, I've got to go back to CCTV it's just amazing what you can do with a CCTV camera nowadays. Uh, you, we have systems out there now. You and I used to walk a beat at a hospital, and we had radios where we were hoping that somebody on the other end would actually answer the radio.
If we were lucky.
If we were lucky. But nowadays, CCTV camera sees something, it can alert security. Security can pull it up on their smartphone and see what it is that they're approaching as they get close to it. I mean, probably the biggest area of improvement in security is CCTV and integrating it with access control, burglar alarm systems. Everything in security has just come so far. It's amazing.
I love it, but I don't understand it most of the time. But it just leaves me speechless sometimes when I see what some of these folks out in the field are putting in, or what you guys are putting in when I go to a job site with you guys on those rare occasions. And Chris, I'm sensitive to your time. I know you guys are busy, and I appreciate you sharing some time with our listeners this morning. If I'm the customer, I'm ABC school district, I'm ABC hospital, ABC retirement community, ABC manufacturing, whatever the case may be. And I'm going to be looking for a security system. What do I want to look for in an integrator? What do I want to look for before I go out and spend anywhere from $5,000 to $500,000 on a system, depending on what I'm doing?
That's a very good question, Steve. And I can tell you that a good security integrator is going to be qualified. They're going to be factory trained on the systems that they sell. Their installers are going to be factory trained on their systems, if they even have installers, and that's a big issue. But a good quality security integrator will be able to assess your needs, like we talked about with the P2T2, and offer industry-specific or customer-specific solutions. They'll work with you, work with your team to design a system that meets your needs. You know, so many times we see people buy a system, they buy 16 cameras, it's exactly the same camera in all 16 locations. That might make sense in some areas, but a lot of times it doesn't. There's areas where lighting is coming through, and the camera that was put in a dark area and the light area may have to be different cameras. And that's something that we look at when we assess that. You want to make sure that the integrator that you choose does their own installations. Training, again, we have to mention training. You got to have good initial training and good follow-up training. The other thing is post-installation service. Do they service what they sell? I've seen far too many companies subcontract an installation. When it comes to service, nobody's available. That's a big issue because, I mean, it is a mechanical system. At some point, you're going to need some service. And the quality of service has got to be as good as the install was or better. All systems are going to have issues. You have to choose a security integrator that has a history of rapid response to emergency issues. I would also check their references. You know, due diligence can't be talked about enough. Just because a guy gave you a quote for a system doesn't necessarily mean they're qualified to install that system. A lot of times they install it, they move on, they go look for the next customer, and you never hear from them again. Any company can tell you how good they are, but I would much rather hear from their existing customers what they think of them.
And you just said something that really resonates loudly with me, because we deal with the same thing in the consulting and training side of the house. We call them trunk slammers. And, you know, there's some really good companies like Sorensen Wilder out there in the market, and we respect them. And I know most of them, and I'm friends with most of them. But boy, I'll tell you what, when I say trunk slammers, there are a lot of people in the consulting, especially, I should say the security consulting industry, not so much on the safety side because that's so much more specialized, but there's a lot of folks in the security industry calling themselves consultants because they worked for a couple of years as a security guard somewhere, and they now call themselves a consultant, and they don't have an office. They don't have an office building or anything like that. They work out of the trunk of their car. So we call them trunk slammers. Good people probably, but definitely not qualified. Sounds like you guys see the same thing.
We absolutely do. I can tell you the security industry has come so far, and it's such a big market now that so many people, if they used to be a security officer somewhere or they were a police officer somewhere, now they're a security expert. We're seeing a lot of electricians that there's a lot of money in security nowadays because, I mean, let's face it, crime is on the rise. People are paying more attention to security, and now every electrician wants to be security. And some are very good at it, but you really need to hire somebody that knows security and has been involved in security like you and I for over 40 years.
And I think trust becomes a big part of it too. I think you've got to trust who it is you're working with, whether it's the consulting and training side of the house, whether it's the security systems integration side of the house. Gosh, I think back to a hospital in Washington, D.C. that we've done a lot of work with over the years. Great hospital, great people, kind of a difficult neighborhood. But when we first looked at their CCTV system, we noticed that every one of the exterior cameras were expensive PTZ cameras, push tilt or pan, tilt, and zoom.
Right.
But none of them, they were all being used as fixed cameras, fixed view cameras. And when we asked them about that, they said, that's what the company we use sold us. That's what they told us we needed. So, the only thing I could put in my mind, of course, I might be a little bit cynical at times, was, hey, salesman, you just sold this hospital a whole bunch of cameras 5 times the cost of what they needed. What are you doing now? I'm going to Disney. To me, it just seemed like they were being ripped off. The cameras were good views. There were plenty of them, but they spent at that time probably $4,000 a camera for what probably could have been between 500 and 1,000 with just as good of an image.
Absolutely. And we still sell PTZ cameras. I can tell you that they're getting kind of phased out because with the technology we've got now with the megapixels on these cameras, you almost don't need PTZs anymore, but there are customers that still need them and there's customers that still want them. We sell PTZ cameras if you've got an active security department, somebody that can sit there and actually zoom in and pays attention to the monitors. The other thing we can do, I would take that same customer, if they've already bought them, why not use them for everything they're good for? Take a look at them and see, do they have active follow? A lot of PTZ cameras right now can be set up to actively follow an intruder. So somebody drives up, that camera will follow them from wherever they park to inside the building. And there are cases for that in some areas, especially in parking lots where you've got people that might be out there by themselves in the middle of the night or something. So nobody's watching the camera, but the camera is actually following and letting the person know that, hey, hopefully they're safe.
I know we're about out of time. Chris, anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? There's so much you can talk about in security technology. Anything else that's coming out on the market? Anything that's exciting? Anything that may pique our listeners' interest in looking at their technology and looking where they are now and where they should be going with it?
Well, we're seeing a big push right now in artificial intelligence. I kind of talked about that a little bit with CCTV, but we're seeing more and more artificial intelligence coming out. There's actually security robots out there now that are replacing security officers. There's drone technology that, it's not for every customer, obviously, but there are customers that are using drone technologies because they've got several hundred acres of land that they need to look at. And cameras are great, but they get very expensive when you try to put 1,000 cameras out watching a very large area. So the technology is rapidly changing. The one thing I'd like to close with, Steve, if I could, is that it's not always the cheapest system that's the best. And in fact, a lot of times the cheapest system will cost you the most. And what I mean by that is somebody low bid a system and they come out to do the install and all of a sudden, well, that wasn't included and that wasn't included. You and I both know, I worked for another company at one point that if the computer had to be moved 30 inches on a desk, there was an upcharge for that. And that's the kind of thing that we try to avoid. That's where a good integrator will come in and make recommendations. I can tell you right now that the computer that had to be moved, the cable was already in the ceiling. All they had to do was move the cable over a little bit. But there's a big upcharge for that. And that's how they make their money. They low bid a project, they come in and they do ad after ad after ad. We try to make sure that we've covered everything. And because of that, we're not always the lowest price. On occasion we are, but it's very rare. But a good integrator is going to look out for your needs, not just what specifically is on the document that you're given. In fact, I've gone back to a lot of them after looking at a bid and saying, hey, who's doing this? Who's doing that? Make sure everything's covered. This story. I had a customer one time that bought an infant security system because he thought it was very, it was the cheapest one on the market and they need an infant security system. So it was great. And it said on the contract to be installed by a local contractor. And he thought, wow, not only am I buying a system, but I'm also helping local business. What they didn't tell him is there was no local contractor. He had to find that local contractor. They had to know what they were doing with the system, and then he had to pay them for that extra. That was not included in the contract. We see it all the time where cable's not included, or, other things that should be in the job are not included. And then it becomes your $30,000 job turns into a $60,000 job when you could have had it done for $45,000, for example. I mean, it's crazy that we see that all the time still.
And I chuckled when you said that because I had forgotten about that event, but I do remember it, and I remember it very well. And I remember it was a mutual client. It was a client of SWA's and MIS that happened to. But I had forgotten about that. But, this kind of behooves me to ask, something you said there was so profound. An uneducated buyer is really potentially going to get hurt. And there's a different word I want to use, but I can't for obvious reasons. But it almost sounds, I guess I can say, like they could really get screwed over by not knowing what the hidden tricks are, or what the small print is, if you will. How do you educate them? I mean, you said a minute ago, you might not be the lowest bidder. So, I've been to a lot of bid openings and things like that where they just automatically take the lowest bidder. How do you educate the consumer, the buyer, that there's more than just price to a bid?
A lot of times, if it's a bid situation, it's often too late to do it, but we will try. We'll come back to them with a bunch of questions saying, who's installing the cable? Cable's not included on here. Is the cable included? Are they installing the cable? I mean, we see, locations. Do you want cameras mounted 10 feet high, 12 feet high? I have another customer that they bought all new cameras for all the exterior doors. Well, it's easier to put the camera right above the door than it was to actually put it where it would see the person coming through the door better. So every camera was mounted right above the door. So the only thing you could see was the top of a person's head going in or out. And that was it. It's very difficult sometimes. I mean, a lot of these places have gone to a security consultant, and the consultant takes a boilerplate that they used 10 or 12 years ago and tries to give them a system based on that. We try to go in and say, here's everything that you need, whether it's conduit, whether it's cable, parts, is everything included? Are you sure of the height of where you want the camera, the location where a card reader is going? Do you want card read in, card read out? With access control, we see all the time where people have got card readers, but they didn't put a door contact on, or they didn't put a request to exit device above the door. Well, that means you're going to get an alarm every time somebody goes out that door. So these are the little things that we try to train our customers on what to look for.
Wow.
And it's usually little things that cost the most. If we didn't already run the cable for that door contact, we didn't already run the cable for that request to exit, that's a huge chunk of money after the fact.
Yeah, because now you gotta go back and play with ceilings, you gotta play with walls, in some of the older buildings, those are concrete walls you have to drill through, and I can appreciate that. And I really appreciate your time this morning, Chris, because as frequently, and I mean, obviously, at least on a daily basis, you and I sit down in your office or mine and just keep each other apprised of what's happening in the business. But even as much as we talk together and share thoughts and ideas, you've opened my eyes to a few things that I have never really thought about today too. So I really appreciate the time. Any closing thoughts that you want to give our listeners?
Yeah, buyer beware. Make sure that whoever you're hiring, you've done your due diligence, you check their references. We had a customer recently, very, very large home being built up north. We gave them 5 references. They checked those, and then they called back, said, hey, give us 5 more. You know what? I think that was amazing, because that tells me that they're actually calling and they're checking your references. References are critical in a situation. You want to make sure not only the integrator that you're hiring is qualified, but they do good work and they come back and they take care of the customer. And the best way to find that out is by asking the customer.
Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough for the time you've given us this morning. I'm sure later in the day, you're going to make me buy you lunch or something, but that's always okay too. Friends, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. Like I said, Chris and I have been together a long time. He's very much a part of SWA. He's just not out in the field the way the rest of us are. And now you understand why. He's busy running the other side of the house. So Chris Sorensen, thank you so much, sir. I owe you one. And to our listeners, thank you guys. I hope you're getting as much out of these as we intend them to be of value to you. And we're going to keep cranking them out and keep trying to find ways to keep you informed of what's happening in the safety and security industries. So until the next time, we wish you well, stay safe, stay in touch, and we'll see everybody soon.